Thank you all for coming, and you guys can introduce yourselves a little bit more as needed.
Fantastic, Beth. Thanks so much for inviting us to be here today. We are delighted. This is what we love to do. So, as Beth said, I'm Andrea. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I come to this work as a school psychologist. I, like many of you, have been working with struggling readers for a very long time and frustrated with the current state of affairs when enter the Reading League, right? And all of these amazing resources and new knowledge and just a really empowering message for teachers that if we apply the science of reading, we can do better for our students. So I'm over here in Indianapolis working hard, and all of a sudden the Reading League says, hey, do you want to bring our resources to your communities? If so, we're looking to start state chapters. And friends, that's what I did. I didn't hesitate. I said, yes, we need this here in Indiana. And so I became the founding president of the Reading League Indiana, which connected me with literacy leaders, with advocates, with folks who had experienced the transformational power of applying the science of reading to classroom instruction all throughout my state and throughout the country. And I'm so excited to introduce you to a couple of chapter leaders today who are going to share their science of reading implementation journeys with you. Um, we have 33 state chapters across the country, which represents about 300 chapter leaders. And all of them are doing this work. They're volunteering their time to support a Reading League chapter because they've seen that impact that the science of reading can have on their students or their own children. And they just want to pay that gift forward so that everybody in their community and their state knows about this. So they're really remarkable people, and I'm so excited to introduce you to two of them in just a little bit. If you're not familiar with the Reading League, we're a national nonprofit based in Syracuse, New York, with the mission of advancing the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence aligned reading instruction. We're the knowledge brokers. We're in the middle, right? We're not the researchers doing that really important work of continuing to refine our understanding and pull together really important outcomes for students. And at the Reading League, we don't provide direct services. We're not doing the work that many of you are doing, which is delivering high quality evidence aligned instruction, but we're in the middle. We're really trying to shed a light on the research in a way that improves outcomes for students because we know that reading is critical to success. I'm glad you joined us for today. Our plan today is to think a little bit about a construct called collective teacher efficacy. This is something that I'm learning about and researching, and I wanted to share just a little bit with you. Then we're going to look at a science of reading implementation story from the district level and think about that really big work of refining our instruction across schools, across classrooms. And so I've got Dr. Staci Bain in Washington to help share that district story. And then I've invited a colleague of mine here from Indianapolis, Stephanie Husenjovic, to share a classroom science of reading implementation story. What if you don't have district support yet? What if you feel like you're on your own? Stephanie's story will really resonate with you in terms of what you can do as a classroom teacher with the curriculum and materials and students in front of you. And then I'm going to share just a few tools at the end that the Reading League has developed to support you in your own science of reading implementation journey. All right, so collective teacher efficacy. Um, I'm so curious if people have heard about this. The first time I heard about collective teacher advocacy was from John Hattie's work on visible learning, where he's seeking to answer a really important question, right? What works best? What works the most often with students? Sometimes I talk with teachers and we say things like, well, I know it works. It works with these students, like I've seen it, or I have some research that shows it works. And friends, I want to suggest that we're past the point of just knowing what works, and we need to think about works for whom and how powerful can we get that desired impact, right? Is it just a small positive impact? That's great, that's important, but we need to start comparing things with small impact to things that have really large impact in the research studies. And so John Hattie looks at meta-analyses, which are compilations of lots of different types of research studies, and looks to create a number that summarizes the potential impact that this practice or this research finding could have. And that's where I first found collective teacher efficacy because it was rated at number one. Now I think it's currently at number two in terms of the most impactful things teachers can do to cause learning with their students. If you look at this graph here, then what we see in the red are reverse effects, things that actually cause harm to learning, right? You might actually forget things if you have lack of sleep. So we don't want anything in red that we're doing in schools. Yellow would be developmental effects. This is the amount of growth we can expect from students just as they develop and their cognitive skills improve and they explore and discover around the world. You know then that we're looking towards those green practices, teacher effects. If you have a student who's placed in almost any classroom with any type of instruction with any teacher, you can expect to see some improvement in academic skills. But then we're going to laser in on those desired effects, that blue zone of what could give us the biggest bang for our buck. Where do we see the most learning? And this is where we see collective teacher efficacy. So again, it's towards the top of things that we can do that cause impact. What does that term mean then, friends? So let's unpack it a little bit. Collective means shared by people acting as a group, right? It's a shared belief, a shared practice. It's something that we're doing together. Teacher is pretty self-explanatory. I'm hoping that many of you are teachers here today. It's you and your school-based teams. That includes your school leaders. It includes your school psychologist and speech language pathologist and resource teacher. It's your school-based teams. And efficacy is the capacity for producing a desired effect. Can you deliver on what you say you're going to deliver? That's efficacy. So here's John Hattie himself explaining a little bit more about what this construct is and why it's so important.
The new number one in visible learning is teachers' collective efficacy. And on the one hand, that's exciting because it confirms the story. On the other hand, it's a bit of an unfortunate title. It kind of implies that having efficacy, having confidence, having all the teachers in the school believing they can make a difference, it's actually more than that. Now, to have a meta-analysis, you have to have lots of studies. This is not a new idea. This has been around a long time. But it's just that Rachel Ells was the one that pulled it all together to show what its combined effect was. And the message I want to get across, it is teachers working together to have appropriately high, challenging expectations of what a year's growth for a year's input looks like, fed with the evidence of impact. And that's what sustains it. It isn't just growth mindset, it's not just rah-rah thinking, it's not just, oh, we can make a difference, but it's that combined belief that it's us that causes learning. It's not the students from particular social backgrounds, it's not all the barriers out there. Because when you fundamentally believe you can make the difference, and then you feed it with the evidence you are, that is dramatically powerful.
Okay, so I love this because it clears up some misconceptions. It's not just believing that you can make a difference. It's not just believing that all students in your building can learn. It's fundamentally believing you can make the difference. As the educator, you can make the difference. And then you feed that belief with evidence that you are. You find those success data points. You watch your data grow. That's what really makes the difference. That is dramatically powerful. The research on collective teacher efficacy is pretty powerful, friends. I've I have dived in to a couple of the studies, starting with Albert Bandura back in the 80s and 90s. He's a social cognitive psychologist. He says this: when educators believe in their combined ability, there are significantly higher levels of academic achievement. Just that piece alone, teachers coming together and believing that they can positively impact student outcomes leads to better outcomes compared to situations where teachers do not believe that. Collective teacher efficacy was also more important in explaining student achievement than socioeconomic status. That's another powerful finding, isn't it? Sometimes I'm in conversations with teachers where they talk as if they're helpless, right? There's nothing I can do. This student has this powering situation that's really having a negative impact on their learning. And there's nothing I can do about it as the teacher. And what we find is that teachers can overcome a lot of those obstacles in students' life with good, powerful instruction. And the key to all of that is believing that we can have an impact on students. In cultures with high collective teacher efficacy, both the teachers and leaders believe that the success and failure in student learning is more about what they did or did not do, and they place that value in solving problems of practice together. I love that. So again, we're going to take ownership that we have the most to do with student learning. Or as Dr. Anita Archer says, how well you teach is how well they learn. That Archerism really sums up collective teacher efficacy to me, right? It's the shared belief that we cause the learning. It's not the students in front of us, it's us as the teachers. We are going to teach in a way that causes learning, and if not, we're going to adjust until we do. All right, Thomas Guskey has done some research on teacher professional development, friends, and I've spent a lot of days in teacher professional development, and this is pretty much how it all goes. Everybody that comes and talks to me in my school says, hey, here's some professional learning, some new knowledge for you. And then we assume that that will change my beliefs. It'll change my understanding about whatever it is they're talking about. Then I'm going to try it out in the classroom. I'm going to do something new, and then student achievement will rise. Give me a thumbs up or put it in the chat if this pretty much summarizes how you think professional learning is in schools, right? Thanks, Beth. This is what I see, right? This is what we expect to happen. The professional learning comes first, then beliefs, then we change instruction, and then hopefully we see some gains in student achievement. What I want to share with you is that the research actually shows that we've got things out of order. So here's what Thomas Guskey's work confirms. We get the professional learning. We try something new. But it's only when student achievement increases, only when we see the success of the new thing we tried, that we actually change our beliefs. This has some really important ramifications, friends, as we are trying to give knowledge of the science of reading to educators all over the country, because it's not just the professional learning in isolation. It has to be those instructional changes lead to success with the students in front of us. We have to have that evidence that what we're doing is working in order for us to change our beliefs and really have this knowledge stick. Okay, so with that brief introduction to collective teacher efficacy, I really want you to listen for signs of that in these implementation stories, okay? What mindsets are evident in the teams that you're going to hear from today? Who on the team provided support and encouragement? Where do you see those early signs of success? How were safe spaces created to try something new? And then how were the results evaluated and replicated? Okay. The chat will be open. You all can feel free to put your questions, your connections, your aha moments in the chat, and I'll be monitoring them while I turn things over to Dr. Staci Bain for our first implementation success story.
Nice. Thank you. That's so compelling. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And Andrea, I'm just so honored that you invited me into this space to be here. So hi, everybody. First of all, I would like to just greet you in the name of being a good human. If you are an educator, then you are a good human. Give me a thumbs up if you are an educator. Perfect. Then you can give yourself another thumbs up, because that does mean that you are a good human. What we do is we educate every single day. And as the former Reading League president and the founding Reading League president of Washington State, what I know about the Pacific Northwest is that we have a need to ensure that all scholars receive explicit instruction out of the gate. How many of you agree with me on that? That we start with explicit instruction and then we scaffold into independent practice. And it is not that kids will just, through inquiry, will happen upon literacy success for all. So thank you for being a good human. Thank you for fighting the good fight of explicit instruction for all people. I'm a former school teacher who had no idea what I was doing. I'm a former principal who, after learning about letters and reading the book, beginning to read, thinking, and learning about print in 2003, I was able to join the Washington State cadre of 50 people who became letters trainers across the state of Washington in 2005. And my question was, oh my gosh, this is such great information. And what does this look like in Tier 1? Because response and intervention back in the early 2000s was secure the core, secure the core. And nobody was coming to my classroom to show me what secure the core looked like. So I had to try to think, well, this is now my petri dish and I have to figure this thing out, because I know that people can learn how to read. I just have to make sure that happens. And then on Dibbles for over 10 years, 91.5% of kids left on benchmark in my classroom, and that happened across my grade level. And then the superintendent asked me to be the principal. And we were able to get 95% of the kindergartners reading on grade level, according to benchmark on Dibbles the first year that I was principal. So we're going to talk about what we're doing. And I believe that teachers make a difference. I believe in what Andrea was saying, that when we have collective practices and we are securing the core, then we can move mountains, and we can do it today. We don't have to wait 3 years for the kids to matriculate. I currently am the founding president of my own company. Our tier 1 content is in 50 out of 50 states and 3 other countries as well. And I've been around for 3.5 years. I was the executive director of K through 12 curriculum and instruction, and responsible for supervising elementary during the days of COVID. And that is all I will say. Do you remember that? I should have said trigger warning. And now again, I have my own company. All right, so off we go. So are results possible? And I'm honored to say today that we have 3 people on the line. One is Dr. Melissa McCrae. Hi, Dr. Melissa McCrae. I asked if she would be able to turn on her camera. She hails from the great state of Mississippi. Dr. McCrae worked for the Jackson Public School District, and now she leads elementary. So hello, all hail Dr. McCrae. Good to see you today. These results are the fruit of Dr. McCrae and her team's experiences as leading a science of reading movement. She has a leader, and her name is Angie Graham. Angie Graham is the executive director in Rankin County, the 2nd largest school district in the state of Mississippi. And Dr. Graham oversees kindergarten PK through 12th grade. So hi, Executive Director Graham. These are your results, and I'm so honored to have had the opportunity to partner with you. I mentioned those 2 just in case you want to private message them and then have a continuing conversation with them. We are better together. So thank you for being here today. So again, the 2nd largest school district in the state of Mississippi, how could, at the end of 2023, kindergarten results be 65% according to iReady? And by the end of 2024, 89%. How could first grade at the end of, according again to iReady, be 44% and then up to 71% at 27% gain? How could we have third graders at 70% and then 81%? And what I would offer, if we'd like to go to the next slide, what I would like to offer is that when teachers are allowed the opportunity and sponsored by executive directors and directors that say explicit instruction is important, knowledgeable practitioners are important, shared practices are important, and we all together have our fingerprint on the blueprint. This is our plan, and we are moving forward. That is how I believe Rankin County was able to bear these results. It is not okay for us to exist in a situation in which it's 2024 and we still have independent consultants, individuals who just get to go into their classrooms, and I'll talk about it in a moment. I call it pick a pedagogy. Pick a pedagogy. Whatever pedagogy you want, just show up in your classroom and do what you think. That is no longer a good enough standard. Then that means that, as we all know, boy, I hope that you didn't get Staci Bain in 2003, because I did not know what I was doing. I picked a pedagogy. It was called Foursquare. It was wrong. I received a book. Somebody said, hey, use this. I did that. It was terrible. Nobody learned. So pick a pedagogy doesn't really work. But when we sponsor collective practices, it does work. And what this shows you is cohort data. And what I would like to note is how tremendous the 2nd grade scores to 3rd grade. That same cohort, 55% in 2023, and a year 2024, 81%. That's a 26% jump for that cohort and collection of scholars. So again, when teachers have a plan, when teachers are sponsored at an executive level, when everybody's fingerprint is on the blueprint for how to slay tier 1 instruction, we can really make changes. And you're probably wanting a little bit more information about what that looks like. So I'm going to talk about this thing at Educate that I call the trifecta. So let's see if I can just navigate to that next slide. So again, these are the people. Read all about it in the Rankin County School District. I'll go back to that in a moment. But I call what Rankin County is doing and what we at Educate support school districts across the nation on is this thing called the trifecta. You can see 3 concentric circles, yes? So the first circle is obviously science of reading research, knowledge. So empirical evidence. What empirical evidence do we have across a system? It's not okay that just Dr. McCrae is well steeped in reading research. Miss Angie Graham is also she understands the research as well. We also have their superintendent, Dr. Rhymes. Dr. Rhymes has an understanding of, I've listened to Solda's story. I know that we should have explicit instruction. So he is a well-informed practitioner as well. That's what it takes. We should have nuggets of information that are consistent across all classrooms. For example, we must sunset the idea, as mentioned at the beginning, that an inquiry-based approach to learning how to read, discovery learning, we must understand that that's not okay. That is a balanced literacy approach. We must be able to identify that. So just what is your basic science of reading understanding? And then in tier 1, what does it look like within classrooms and across classrooms? What does it look like for kindergartners, for first graders, for second graders, for third graders, for fourth graders, for fifth graders, for 6th through 12th graders? In Rankin County, they did a kindergarten through 8th grade implementation of what does tier 1 look like, feel like, and taste like according to science of reading tenets. We can be the smartest people in the room with science of reading understandings. We can also have a really good framework for how we can frame tier 1, secure the core. How can we secure the core? But at Educate, what I would say is that it takes people to have knowledge, and it takes people to deliver tier 1 instruction. So that's where instructional intelligence comes in. How we are able to pop instruction, how we are able to slay, I call it slay instruction, will determine as well how many scholars we are able to get reading on grade level. So in Rankin County, for example, it wasn't just that they had knowledgeable practitioners and we trained them up on the science of reading. It wasn't just that we provided them with a framework for this is what you can do in kindergarten, in first grade, and second grade, and third grade. It was the very teachers that lifted both of those components every single day for their ELA block out of the gate. Because what I would like to say, and what you most likely believe in because you're here, if you're here in this conference, it means that you are a knowledgeable practitioner. Can I just name that? I'm trying to think about who I'm speaking to. I also think that I'm speaking to not only a knowledgeable practitioner, but a reading science advocate. Is that correct? Is that who you are? Like, you will stop at nothing. You are into this. This is your vibe. Well, this is what I think that you probably believe in as well, which is, let's go ahead and chorally read this, everybody. The best defense intervention is a good offense, tier 1 instruction. So we've always heard you can't intervene your way out of, tier 1 that's a little bit shoddy. Yes, that's true. So how are we going to decrease intervention numbers? Shared practices, collective efficacy around tier 1. And again, what I think that looks like is the trifecta. We're knowledgeable practitioners with a science of reading. We frame up tier 1 in a particular way, and we turn on our instructional teaching pizzazz or instructional intelligence. And that's what Rankin County did. And that's how they were able to get the scores that they got. So going back to transformation, when you walk into schools in Rankin County, the goal is that it does not look like this. What is this? The first building represents kindergarten through 5th grade. The second building represents 6th through 8th. The third building represents 9th through 12th. You'll see it says K in the black dot, first black dot on the left. Does everybody see that? And then there are 4 triangles. The first triangle is yellow. Next 2 are red. Next one is brown. First triangle, you walk into this teacher's classroom, they're using LLI. Second 2 classrooms, they're using Reader's Workshop. The third one, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing. First grade, all letters trained, all science of reading trained, all have training, and have also figured out how to move reading research into action. So they are aligned in their practices. They're also actually getting 90+% of kids reading on grade level. That kind of feels good. But then that's the only grade level that is aligned in their practices. So what that looks like then on a district-wide scale with pick-up pedagogy is something like this. So if we looked at 12 buildings, I think that's the next slide. Thank you. Perfect. One more. So we can see the magnitude of our decisions in PICA pedagogy. So if we're wondering why this work is so hard, I would offer this. It's this primarily. And then it's 2024, and we're smarter than this. We can think about physicians. They go into the operating room. They follow a surgical protocol. We can think about pilots. They go onto their plane. They follow a protocol. They check things off the list every single time. And that is what I think that we all probably want. We probably all want to have aligned practices. So because this is a very short amount of time that we're able to be together, I thought it might be helpful for us to select one pedagogical practice that might really make a difference across all classrooms across an entire district. Does that sound cool? But basically, pick a pedagogy. Let's go ahead and sunset that, because we can have a plan, we can have a goal, and we can do this work together for Rankin County types of success. All right, it's possible. So this is what we're going to do to align our pedagogical practices. We're going to focus on one thing, instructional intelligence, and that would be, thank you, my bestie. Next slide. The great Anita Archer. And how often have you heard her say, opportunities to respond? Let's lean into that today. When I go into classrooms to teach, what I try to do, and I'm sure that you try to do this as well, channel Dr. Archer. So that means, and we may be thinking, well, everybody knows about Dr. Archer. And sadly, I believe that it is our moral and social imperative to be able to give back to Dr. Archer and to sustain her legacy by giving back to her and uplifting her work. So I always love to say, Dr. Archer, watch her on YouTube, get her books, try to embody Dr. Archer as much as we can so that we can have kids learning. Again, that third circle of instructional intelligence, one component is how active are students in the classroom. And we can think about when Dr. Archer says, I say something, we say something. We would think that everybody knows that now. Best friends, again, I'm in 50 states. I started with the Mississippi Department of Education project in 2013, training thousands of teachers across the state of Mississippi on letters. Remember that when letters started in the state of Mississippi 10 years ago? I was part of the team that was so honored to fly out and train thousands of teachers in Mississippi. And I would say there and now again across all 50 states, do we know Dr. Archer? And sadly, not enough people say yes. I believe that every single teacher say, yes, I do know about Dr. Archer. Like when we get to that point, that we're going to be popping instruction, right? So I look at you as a leader in the science of reading space. Let us all continue to uplift Dr. Archer's work. And how many people know this? We do, but not very many that I talk to. I say something, we say something. I say something. That's right. My hands go out. You say something. My hands go in. I say something. That is Dr. Archer through and through. And how often people have an opportunity to respond really does make a difference. We know that. In Rankin County, if scholars had the popsicle stick every single time, very low opportunities to respond, would they have had those results? I would offer no. I would offer no. So on the next screen slide, we're going to talk about the frequency of opportunities to respond. So again, I look at you as a leader in this field and leader in the science of reading community. So when we're talking and uplifting colleagues, one question that we would have for our colleagues would be, how frequently do people have opportunities to respond in the classroom? Is it of high frequency? And what that looks like again is this. We're learning about ecosystems today. What are we learning about, everybody? That's right. Let's go ahead and feel ecosystems. Ecosystems. Good. Let's go ahead and think about systems. What is that morpheme? What does that meaningful chunk mean? Let's go ahead and think about eco. What does that meaningful chunk mean? So to the point of the main speaker this morning, she was talking about how we funnel things through the layers of language. That's exactly right, with high frequencies, high opportunities for people to respond. Yes, yes, yes. Let's go to no frequency, best friends. We know this. I have my hood on, I have my earbuds in, my head is down, and I'm falling asleep. That's a no frequency. Sadly, that is tolerated in the United States of America. So moving from no frequency to high frequency, how do we get our teachers with their teaching legs underneath them so that we know that we want high opportunities to respond? Low frequency would mean something like, I raise hands every now and again. Medium frequency, I raise a lot of hands. And, I'm really not into the hand raising, quite frankly. I don't have enough time for it, and I can't organize my brain around it either. So that's why, again, I don't do popsicle sticks either. Yes, I had popsicle sticks. I'm just going to burn them in the burn pile because I can do so much with I say something, we say something. I say something, we say something. I'm a teacher. I know how to teach. Let's teach. You're a teacher. You know how to teach. Let's teach. All right. So how often do K through 12 scholars have the opportunity to respond? A quiet classroom is a scary classroom for me in terms of learning. Then the next thing would be, well, how are the K-12 students responding? For little ones, I like to say, all right, scholars, we just read this sentence or this little paragraph. Speak into your hand, whisper into your hand. Who are the characters in the story? That helps us move from just turn and talk all of the time or choral response to I can still hear the responses in their hand. Make a mental note, scholars. Blah, 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 blah. Here's another one. Every mouth moving, every brain learning. What is it, everybody? Every mouth moving, every brain learning. Yes. And then we have scholars that are like, girl, no, I'm not doing it. And then what do? We do this. I'm speaking to you because I know that you are my colleague and that we share one brain around this. We know that it is just a very basic classroom management to smile and move closer to the people that are not participating. Because as soon as we accept that somebody's not going to participate, we say, oh, that's okay, they're not going to participate. Guess what? They're not learning. We don't know if they're learning. We also don't know what I'm going to do in response so that I can do something for you in the moment because heavens knows on the next slide, and I'll repeat it in just a moment. I don't want to wait until I go to the PLC meeting to take care of things. I want to take care of things in the moment when I see them happening. Corrective immediate feedback. Can we say that together? Corrective immediate feedback. And that then means that people have to say something for us to give feedback to, but what if people again don't want to participate? Again, we just crawl ourselves closer to the people. And I find even in 8th grade, if I get really close and I keep smiling, I'm like, good job. Then they will start participating because the last thing people want to do is have a teacher really close to them in their faces, right? And I don't have to say, let's do it again until everybody does it. No, smiling, happy, with a high expectation that in this classroom, it's every brain learning, every mouth moving. And another thing, here's another tip and trick. Do you want this tip and trick? Put it like, no, girls, stop the tips and tricks in the chat. Or yes, more tips and tricks. Just let me know. Okay. Does that sound cool? Okay. All right. Another tip and trick is this. I'm not the future. You are the future of this community. You are the future of this nation. You are the future of global citizenry. And because you are the future, I'm going to do my very best teaching. I'm going to do my very best teaching because I want you to have the very best learning experience. It is your future that I am invested in. And because you matter to me, I'm going to bring my sleigh. And at the end of this time, I want you to go ahead and fist a 5 like a Yelp review. How was my investment in you? Did I give a 5-level investment, or was it like, no, food poisoning from this type of teaching? You didn't care about me at all. I want you to evaluate my investment in you because I want to make adjustments according to that. Right? Sound cool? And then on the flip side, I also like to say to scholars, since it's the end of our time together, go ahead and share with yourself a 0 to 5 Yelp review. How invested were you in your future today in participating? So then that helps us be accountability partners. Why? Every mouth moving, every brain learning. It is your brain plus my brain that equals success. What is it, everybody? It is your brain plus my brain that equals success. That is right. It's not just your brain on your own. We are in a community. All right. Is everybody catching the vibe? Because the number one question that we'll get is, well, Stace, but how do you apathetic. Kids don't want to participate. Nope. Nope, doesn't work. Well, we have to make it work. Because what does DeHaan say? learning is active. Okay. Woo! I got a little excited about that. I went a little too far into that. Hopefully that was helpful. So that goes back to, what are we doing with the responses? I get a lot of heat in social media. There's just no way whole group instruction can be effective. Whole group before small group. Explicit instruction before implicit instruction. Out of the gate with strong pop-in instruction, engage back and forth, high opportunities to respond. Because what we're doing with the responses, we're calculating. Learning is not a spectator sport. We're calculating the accuracy of the voice of the responses. We're doing something to move to the next level if accurate, and we're doing something if not accurate to kind of like, whoops, scaffold it up. How can I get kids back on track? We're calculating all of that in our minds. That's why we're irreplaceable. That's why we're irreplaceable. We can do all of that. It's like a symphony conductor, listening to every single instrument all at once and doing something about it in the moment. So again, we wouldn't want to wait until PLCs to go and say, oh, this particular pocket of scholars are struggling. We want to be able to identify it in the moment. And again, we can only do that with high opportunities to respond and to be reflective in the moment of teaching. It's called good teaching. And that's why you are irreplaceable. Go ahead and write down in your notes, I am irreplaceable. I am irreplaceable. I am irreplaceable. That's right. All right, next. So align teaching practices with high opportunities to respond. What are we doing? We're listening to the voices. The next slide will talk to us about the fact that if we do these practices across an entire system, we don't have to wait for 3 to 5 years to have changes. This is one critical piece of a collective game plan. If we can just, from this moment in time together, this hour and 15 minutes that we have together, if we can implement one district-wide change, one school-wide change, one grade level change, it would be that we take the greatest amount of opportunity to have all scholars, quote, engaged at once. But again, that means that we dig into the minutia of what the, quote, how to engage all scholars look like. Do we have peppy, perky instruction, as Dr. Archer would say? Are we listening to the responses and doing something about it in the moment? Or are we just saying, I'm going to teach this little bit. It's going to be very boring. Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. And then you're going to go to small group. And then that's, quote, where I'm going to differentiate. Nope. We get on our differentiation shoes and we can do that in the moment. And that's what it takes. Individual teaching practices that are collective with engaged teaching and learning. So if you are wondering and wanting more information, I'm more than happy to connect with you. And also, additionally, I'm just so honored that the Rankin County team could be here in our presence. They're the people that are doing the lifting of the work every single day. They are committed to literacy and justice for all. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. Dr. McCrae, I have watched her teach in classrooms as the director of K-12 across I think like 20 elementary schools. I would offer, if Dr. McCrae can find time to be in classrooms teaching one, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, I think that all of us can do that as well. So I would recommend that. We should be able to model pizzazzy teaching from the top, from the boardroom to the bus. Everybody's fingerprint on the blueprint. We mean business. This is not an initiative, a swing of the pendulum that's going to go away next year, that we can do this together. And again, results do reshape beliefs. So with that, thank you for changing lives. Tier 1 changes lives. If we want less of a headache, we're going to focus district-wide on Tier 1 first, which does not mean we just buy new instructional materials, throw them into classrooms, and think that we're going to have some miraculous transformation. People, the big people move the little people, and what we do in our big people time will determine how the little people move. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And thank you so much. I'm Staci Bain from Washington State, and it has been an honor to be with you today. Always know that you are a good human and you educate.
Thanks, Staci. All right, friends. Before we transition to our next story, in the chat, tell me where you heard signs of collective teacher efficacy. Think about all those examples and what Dr. Bain just shared, and tell me where you saw signs of success. Tell me where you heard about collective action. Tell me where you heard about the change happening. One of the big ahas for me from Staci's presentation, right, is if we're going to have collective teacher efficacy, we have to know what other classrooms are doing. We have to have assurance that we're all using that same blueprint, right? That's an integral piece. Shared practices. Thanks, Stephanie. I also love that the first thing she highlighted was not a brand new curriculum. It wasn't doing 17 things at once, right? It was, let's focus in on opportunities to practice, opportunities to respond. I've heard Angie Hanlon share that as a key factor in their Wisconsin, in the Wisconsin school that she's in, that if a student wasn't mastering skills, they counted up how many times is a student responding to that skill, right? If we're teaching a new skill, how many opportunities to respond do they have? If the curriculum gives 12, we're going to double it. If that's not enough, we're going to triple it, right? We're going to find that number that helps that student get to mastery. Leadership that walks the talk. That's right, friends. Move away from a pedagogy. Focus. Every mouth moving, every brain learning. Absolutely. Absolutely. That engagement will matter. Collective action in the data. That's right. Can you imagine that data meeting when the teacher saw that data? It's like, whoa, right? Collective ownership of the data. All right, friends, fantastic. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk to somebody who has made a huge difference in my career. Whenever I think about the success of the science of reading, I'm telling Stephanie's story over and over again. We work together in Decatur Township. And Stephanie, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit and how your journey got started.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Husenjovic, and I am always honored and very excited when Andrea asks me to speak at these things, because this lady knows a lot of experts in the field, like Dr. Bain, and she just knows everyone. And the fact that she calls her kindergarten teacher friend in Indianapolis, Indiana, just shows that she sees the importance of teachers hearing from other teachers about what this implementation can look like. So thank you for having me. So my journey started around 2018. Our school district got a grant to develop instructional leadership teams in our schools. So our school was an all preschool kindergarten building, which was a sort of a unique setting. So we had 400 to 500 preschool to kindergarten students. So our leadership team consisted of our building principal, assistant principal, a lead teacher, and then 2 classroom teachers. So I really appreciated that I was asked to be on that team and that I got to have that teacher voice present in making those decisions about instruction in our school. So around that same time that we started that team, our assistant principal was sharing with us what she was learning about the science of reading. And that was the first time I had ever even heard those words. And I was year 11 teaching. And so she was sharing how there was a disconnect between what we were doing in our school as far as instruction goes and many others around us, and the disconnect between that and what science of reading research says. And one of the first things that really made us question how we were teaching was our kids were leaving kindergarten knowing letters and sounds. And then they would be at that end of year benchmark of reading at a level C or a level D. But then we were learning that they were not proficient readers in grades 1 through 3, and they were not passing those state reading assessments. So we knew we had a lot to work on, but we couldn't do everything at once, right? So we decided that as an early childhood building, we would focus on oral language. And so that was our first focus as a school. And it was really nice because we would research as a team and look for those practices. And we called on our SLPs in the building, and they were doing PDs at the time and teaching us about how language systems connect to literacy. And so we really had a good thing going, and this took a year-long process of just working on this one focus. So if we go to the next slide, I can share a few things that we were able to implement school-wide. So one thing we committed to do was integrate more language opportunities just across the day. And I like sharing these because they don't require a whole lot of extra planning, just more intentionality and fitting them into what you already do. So one thing is we wanted our students to answer and complete sentences. And if they didn't know how to do that, we would give them the sentence and have them repeat that back. So that was just one of our daily practices that we would always expect of students. We also included a lot of turn and talks through parts of the day. So not just after a read aloud, we did do that, but also during our morning meeting time, we would turn and talk during math time to talk about our math thinking. We gave students sentence starters when they didn't know what to say. And then one of my favorite ones was just allowing more natural conversations to occur throughout the day. And that really helped, having our principal sort of suggesting that, like, if I walk into your classroom for a walkthrough, like, it's okay if kids are talking at their tables and working together with partners and things like that. We also made a no silent lunch rule. So if you have a silent lunch rule at your school or in your building, try to ban it. And then when parents would come to visit, we had a no cell phone policy, like when they would come to have lunch, so that they could engage in those conversations and model that. Just a couple of other things. We wanted to have more of an explicit oral language time built into the day. So we all learned about the expanding expression tool. So if you're not familiar with that, I would suggest checking that out. Basically, it just gets students to think and talk more about topics that you're learning about and objects and things. So I like to use that for a lot of background building with my students and connect it to our writing time. Our SLPs were wonderful, and they screened all of our kindergarten students and were able to create some intervention groups. So kids that needed a little more than what we were able to provide in the classroom, and worked with them in that small group setting. And then finally, just integrating some vocabulary and knowledge building across the day, including play centers. So if we were learning about community helpers, then in our dramatic play, we might have set up a fire station. Or if we were learning about apples, we would have like an apple market, and kids would be able to use that language in an authentic, playful way. Again, that took a year. All of those things we were working on took a year or so to implement across all of our classrooms. So while that was going on, once you hear about the science of reading, most of us, like, we can't get enough and we just want to learn more. So I was ready to do what's next. So what can I implement next in my classroom? And one of the first things I learned about was the reading rope. And so like Stacy mentioned, it wasn't just a pick a pedagogy or go to Teachers Pay Teachers and see what am I going to teach next week. I used the reading rope to look at the elements of my literacy block, what things were being addressed and what things were not being addressed in my literacy block. So I knew I couldn't do everything and make all of the changes. So I decided that I needed to be more systematic and explicit with how I was teaching new phoneme grapheme correspondences. So I just picked one instructional routine that I wanted to change. And I had the help of my SLP. She came down during one of my preps and she helped me take down my word wall and change to a sound wall, and showed me how I can use that to be more explicit with teaching new sounds to students. So that was one of the first things that I did, was be more explicit teaching sounds and give students more practice with applying that sound to reading and spelling words. So I didn't change my curriculum. I didn't abandon my scope and sequence. I kept going with what I had, but just changed the instructional routine of how I introduced those sounds. Another thing I started looking at was how much time I was spending with students in small groups. So at the time, I was spending between 45 and 60 minutes of my lit block in small groups and doing a lot of the same things for each group. So I knew I wanted to make some shifts there as well, as far as looking at skills students needed and grouping them by skills. And then using decodable text instead of leveled readers. So I want to talk just a little bit about what that transition was like. On the next one. So like I mentioned, I had taught for many years before learning about the science of reading, and I used leveled readers like you see there at the top. So I would have picked that book because it had the sight word look in it. And I would have called students back, read a couple of pages to them, and they would have finished the book on their own. So when you think about what students need to interact with a text in that way, they just had to memorize words, remember the pattern, and look at the pictures. So we know that none of those things lead to skilled reading. So I wanted my kids to actually have some practice with decoding words. Luckily, I had another option available to me with my curriculum. So I had the leveled reader set, and I also had decodable text like you see there on the left. So I decided to just switch to using those exclusively. And I thought all of my problems were going to be solved because now I was using decodable text. And you can probably guess, it wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. My students were struggling. Many of them were struggling to get the words off the page. So the good things that I was seeing is they were using sounding out the words as their primary strategy. So those were some of the first things that I noticed that were good changes. But then I was like, I wasn't sure, like, okay, I'm using decodable text. They can't read the words. What's happening? So I'm just reaching out to my people, figuring out that the reason that they weren't able to read the words because I needed a stronger connection to what I was doing in whole group phonics instruction and what I was asking them to read. So I needed to do some more preparation for them to access that text. So I'm going to talk about that again here in just a minute. But just in general, when I choose text in my classroom now, I consider what the purpose is. So if my purpose is for them to decode words, I'm going to use a decodable that aligns with my scope and sequence, which now I would use that U-Fly passage on the bottom right because that's the phonics curriculum that I'm using right now. But if my goal is to build vocabulary and knowledge, I'm going to do that through read alouds or by assigning students books that go along with the topics to listen to. So if we could go back quickly to what I was saying about the decodable text. So you can go to the next one, Andrea. So I learned that I needed to give kids more practice with reading at the word level and sentence level to prepare them a little bit better for reading that decodable text. So I was having to add that in because the lessons provided in my curriculum didn't have that practice time. So we would introduce a new sound and then that would be it. We weren't applying it to reading and spelling words. So I had to add that in on my own. Now that we use U-Fly, it does a nice job of giving those practice opportunities within the curriculum. So I just want to share, if we have time, what do you think, Andrea? Okay, I just want to share just a little part of that process. So we teach kids the sounds for acquisition. We give them some time to practice building fluency at the word level. And this part in the video is us practicing at the sentence level. So if you could just maybe put in the chat things you notice me or the students.
Please look for heart words first. What heart words do you see? And the again. All right, do we see any S endings? Yes. I'm hearing somebody say two. Is there two? There's one. There are two S's, but this is the only S ending. So we'll read that base word and then with an S. This one's at the beginning, so we'll just read that like we usually do. Eyes on the board and everyone start with that heart word. With an S, it's reread. I'm hearing sit, but I see at. Let's try that again. Let's put s and it together. Go. Sid. What word? Sid and Meg. Reread. Sid and Meg see the cats. Wonderful. Sid and Meg see the cat. Do they see one cat? No. They see more than one cat because we have that S ending. Great job, everybody. We're going to write some sentences. So please go get your phonics notebook and pencil.
All right. So that makes going to that decodable text when we get into small groups or as a whole group through a choral read, it makes it a lot easier for them if they've had some of that practice and a lot of that feedback as a whole group. So you don't have to be on a leadership team to be able to do things like this in your school. And it doesn't always go smoothly. Being willing to go first is always hard sometimes because you don't have everyone on board with you. So just being able to go first, try things out, and be honest about what the successes and challenges are. When I wasn't sure what to do, I had people that I could reach out to. We did have that leadership team where we could collaborate on some things. We had our SLPs and our school psych to reach out to in the building, and then also the Reading League Indiana. So coffee chats, those types of things, I would be able to hear about something and implement it and try it out. Another challenge is when some systems are not yet in place in your school. So when I first started with screening, I was kind of sneaking around using Acadians because that wasn't happening yet. So those can be challenging sometimes when you don't have useful data. If you don't have a good MTSS process, that can make things challenging too. But just doing what you can and having a strong tier 1 and bringing up the issues around tier 2 with your building leaders is what I've done and my best advice. I always like to share some of my real life data. I had my data from last year, but I finished assessing, so I decided why not? Let's put the fresh data in here. So at the beginning of the year, I had one student who knew letters, all of his letters and half of his sounds, but most of my students did not know any sounds or they knew very few. I knew from the beginning that my students needed systematic, explicit instruction with letter and sound correspondences. So my plan for that was just to teach the lessons and be preventative as possible and give students a lot of opportunities to respond, both in whole group and small groups. We haven't finished all of our alphabet lessons yet, but you can see at quarter 2, we have most students know the sounds that have been taught, and we have some work to do with a few of them. You can go to the next one. This is my Dibbles data. So this is not 100%, but it is a big celebration. We went from 15% meeting or exceeding at the beginning of the year to 60% meeting or exceeding for the middle of the year on their composite score. So lots of things to celebrate there. They've really worked hard. I'm tired. But I have some, if I look at the individual assessments, I can use that to make decisions on what I need to address whole group and who I can group together based on skills in my small groups. So you can see we're in pretty good shape. It's kind of small, but we're in pretty good shape with phoneme segmentation. So that's not something I'm going to continue just doing that 1 to 2 minutes phonemic awareness practice as a whole group. And then I have a couple of students that will need a little additional practice. We're all over the place with nonsense word fluency. So just really looking at that to see if kids are making mistakes with vowels. Is it a blending issue? Do they need to be more automatic with letters and sounds? So just need to dig into that a little bit more to decide what to do next. So as far as next steps in the journey, I just continue to share things I'm doing in my classroom with other teachers. through conversations. Sometimes I'll do a video and share it with someone, or they're always invited to come into my classroom. I just continue to try to build trust and support with the leaders in my building. My principal let me leave early today to come and do this, so that's always important to have that support. And then I just continue to enhance my instruction as I learn new things. It's not perfect, but it looks better than it did last year. And I'm pretty proud of what my literacy block looks like now. And I'm seeing good results each year.
She's seeing great results each year, friends. Decatur Township looks like a lot of your districts and schools, right? We have a lot of families who send us their very best on that yellow bus the first day of kindergarten, and they expect us to teach their kids how to read. But we know, because we know our families and we know this district well, that there's a lot of students who come in without those prerequisite skills. They don't have strong oral language and vocabulary. They've never been to a preschool where they've been exposed to letters and sounds. We have families that are in crisis mode or working so hard that they don't have time to read aloud. And so that focus, that simultaneous focus on developing oral language while we're teaching explicit systematic phonics skills was a game changer. And Stephanie was the first to really implement that and put these together. In her first year, she had 100% of her students reach those end of year benchmarks. That's students with IEPs, that's students who didn't speak English before they walked in the door. That's everybody. And so she's consistently seeing these kinds of results. And again, success built upon success. So then everybody wants to know what's going on in Stephanie's classroom. And it's been pretty transformative for our community.
So my last word of encouragement, I call this the Anna rule. If you are familiar with the movie Frozen, it's just to start with one change and then do the next right thing after that. So you can't do it all at once, but one change at a time can lead to great progress.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for sharing your story again. Friends, put in the chat where you hear some collective teacher efficacy happening in this story, right? One of the first places that I heard Stephanie talk about this is when she said, I'm switched from predictable to decodable text. Even though her students weren't successful for it right away, she saw that early sign of success, right? She's like, oh, now they're looking to the letters to sound out the word. She could identify that small success even before they were reading it fluently. So that's so huge. Celebrate those small successes. Jessica, thanks for that. Great collaboration with a speech language pathologist, right? Those are language and early literacy experts, and so utilize them in your classroom. Fantastic. Great, great work. Okay, friends, we're going to have time for questions. So if you have a question about the Rankin County transformation story, if you have a question for Stephanie about her classroom transformation story, put it in the chat. And while you're thinking about those questions, I'm going to share just a few ideas of how the Reading League might be able to support your success story, friends. I know that's why you're here today, is to do the very best that you can for your students. Connect with us. We are always sharing research and tidbits and upcoming opportunities to learn in our newsletter and on social media. So find us and connect with us. The Reading League Compass is one of our newer resources, and it's really to bring reliable guidance for different stakeholder groups, right? Because if you search the term the science of reading right now, you get back too many hits that it's not even helpful. And so where can you go for reliable guidance? We're hoping that the Reading League Compass is one of the places that you turn to. So you can look here to see if you are an educator, if you work with English learners, if you're an administrator, where to go, and there's some really helpful starting points for you. Everything is vetted. We're really careful about what we promote and what we put out there. The curriculum navigation reports and curriculum tool is under that curriculum decision makers tab. And we just launched 2 new reports this week, friends. So that keeps coming. Did Oregon get their Reading League chapter? Thanks, Beth. January. We have several new chapters coming, including Oregon. Let's see here. The Reading League Journal. Friends, I love getting the Reading League Journal because it's the best way I can keep up to date with what's happening in reading research without subscribing to like cognitive psychology and linguistics and neuroscience journals, right? This is written for practitioners. There are several articles by practitioners. And so it's a great way to read a summary of the research, get some practical takeaways without like going knee deep into all of those research journals that are out there. We host coffee chats with the authors to really dive in and unpack what's going on in the journal articles. And there's a number of free ones on our website that you can use and study and replicate. We gather folks together to learn. So we will be in person twice in 2025, both times in Chicago, Illinois. The first one will be in April. That's the Reading League Summit, which is really focused on with growing awareness comes incomplete understandings, and help us have some dialogue within the research community about where do we have commonalities, where do we still not know the full answer yet, and how can we keep moving forward for our students in a productive way. We'll also gather in October for our conference, which is more of an a la carte option where you can choose the sessions and the paths that really align with what you need to learn about, and or find the national experts that you want to hear from. So we feature just incredible researchers, practitioners, national experts from all over come together in one place to share their knowledge with you. So they're both in Chicago this year. I hope that you'll be able to join us. The Reading League also offers professional learning and virtual coaching. If you as an individual are interested, we have some online courses, and then we also have school-based partnerships where we can come in and support your entire team. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our growing chapter network, friends. So Staci and Stephanie represent our Reading League chapter network. Angie and Melissa are going to be a part of our future Mississippi team leadership. Beth is on our Oregon leadership team. And so these are really incredible people, again, who are paying this knowledge forward. If you haven't yet connected with a chapter, I would encourage you to. It's a great place to find your community, to share resources, to build each other up, and build our collective teacher efficacy at a greater level. That we can do this and we can implement this type of change for our students. Here's the QR code to stay connected if you want to hear all the updates about when new chapters launch, about when we have new curriculum navigation reports, announcements about conference, etc. This would be the place to go. We'll just send you one monthly e-newsletter that has all of that information. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see what questions we have. So the first question I saw was about info sessions with families about changes you are making. So Melissa, I love that you jumped in. Do you want to just unmute and share a little bit about that in Rankin County?
Okay, I will. So when we started the shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy, and guys, this is our 4th year in, and we have seen tremendous growth, leaps and bounds across all content areas. And I will say that Staci, I had knowledge of structured literacy coming in from a different district, but I needed a way to kind of put it all together so it made sense to everybody, not just me. So she kind of helped us with that with her framework. And so we took that framework and we literally rolled it out across our district. Angie, you fix me if I get wrong, but across K-8. And we started with 6th grade, worked backwards because we were doing some things with structured literacy in our K and 1 grades. And so from that, when we began to shift, we realized that we had to make sure that our parents were completely aware of what was going on and how this was going to impact them and what they will be seeing coming home. So what we did was my team and we came together and I told them, I said, we have got to do some parent PD. So we did virtual sessions. Most people call them lunch and learns, but we call them conversations with curriculum. So what we did, I started it beginning with the shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy, walk parents through what that would look like, what you saw coming home previously, and what you're now going to see coming home across our content. Then each session, when we did a session a month, after that, we did ELA, we did math, and we did science. So that gave us a total of 4 sessions. We recorded those. We gave parents lots of hard copy information because we wanted them to not just be a part of the virtual conversation, but to have some things in hand so that when we were talking, they had in hand what we were talking about. And we also revised our report card. And with the revising of the report card, we sent parents a report card guide to help them understand what was happening and what was shifting in the report card, especially in our K2, because we are standards based in K2. And so we needed them to understand we're opening up the standards so that you can see, because when we were doing balanced literacy, all we could tell parents was keep reading with your child, read with your kid, but we were not giving them pinpointing PA phonics. We were not giving them what was hindering them from being a reader, a strong reader, and hindering their comprehension. So with revising the report card, now they could see the standards. And when teachers had conversations with them, they could have conversations around those standards and what parents could specifically do to support the children at home. So we have seen, as Stacy shared, just tremendous growth, building the knowledge and the capacity of our teachers. Now, when she shared that piece about efficacy, and my dissertation was all about that, but it was dealing with principles. So when you're talking about efficacy and making sure that you're not having all these people, our teachers doing all these different things, which is what we had going on. So we had to scale this across the district. Now, it has not been an easy lift. We have had some hard times, some hard days, Angie and I. Some days we feel like we've been punched in the gut, in the head, and everywhere else, but we stayed the course and moving forward and stood our ground on what was best for students and stood our ground with the framework and making sure that everybody is following through. So now, just a little bit about where we are now. This is year 4. So now we're preparing to adopt an HQIM. Our teachers are knowledgeable about the science of reading and structured literacy. They know what should be happening in that classroom. They understand how all of the components of reading come together. They understand the reading rope, the writing rope. We've been through all of that, and continually as our PD is rolled out, those are the pieces that we keep before them so that we make sure that they're understanding how all of these things are connected. So that once we get to this HQIM, that we really will make a very informed and intelligent decision about what we're going to do next as a next step in our district. And we're going to bring parents along with that. So once the HQIM is selected, we'll come back and bring our parents on board and do some parent sessions again with them so that they understand the why and what's going to change with students as we go forward.
Thanks, Dr. McCrae. That's a really helpful insight. I appreciate you sharing that. I want to stick with this question, and then we have another question I might come back to you for. But Stephanie, tell me about how you communicated the changes to parents. Were they surprised when they stopped getting like the leveled readers home? Like, tell me about that switch.
Yeah, so I ended up making a lot of videos, just really like 1 to 2 minute videos to post on Parent Square. So I'm like, this is a word list your child is bringing home. They're going to sound out the words. Here's what you can do if they don't know how to do that. So that was really the best way. When I sent home the passages that we were reading, it was something that we have already had a lot of opportunities reading in small groups. And then they took it home to read to their parents, and a lot of them were impressed that they were able to read the words. And again, I would just do like a quick video of what that looked like when they brought it home, that they were going, if they didn't know the word, that you can help them sound it out like this.
That's so
If I
supportive.
could
I love
piggyback
that.
off that for just a second, that
Mhm.
Stephanie mentioned about, what you were sending home. Well, our parents were used to getting a spelling list. So when we moved away from that and we were just talking about spelling patterns, we had like a little mini revolt with that. And we really schools had to go back and educate parents for them
Yep.
to understand we need them to learn the pattern, not these 10 words, because that's all we're going to learn is 10 words. That's going to keep us locked. And
Right.
so we did have to do quite a bit of work behind the scenes with that as well. So I appreciate this. Stephanie, thank you for sharing your story today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also want to mention that I try not to send too much home that's about decoding, because I'm protective of how the sounds are made, and I don't want to cause any of that confusion. So the only things I do send home is a word list or a passage that we've already done in class. And then I do encourage families, obviously, to read books to their child that interest them. But other than that, I'm not a big homework girl.
That's right. It's because we know it's not as impactful, right, as other things that we can be spending our time on. So that's a great way to round that out. Beth assured me we could go over by just a few minutes, so I don't want to miss this question from Jessica in the chat about middle and high school students who still need foundational skills, right? There's so much work in grant money for early intervention, of course, rightly so, but we have grades, right? We have lots, hundreds of thousands of students who didn't get those foundational skills, are now in middle school and high school. I'm going to refer you to a previous ORTII session by Julie Brown. Beth, I don't know if that's available to find a link for, but she is another success story, right? Of how do I, as a middle school intervention teacher, how do I work with my students and give them the appropriate dose in a way that honors the integrity of these students who have been through a lot of failure at school? And she just does a beautiful job sharing her success story. So we'll share that link with you. But Dr. McCrae, Dr. Graham, do you have anything to add for middle school?
I'll
School.
speak to that. Yes, I know Dr. McCrae had mentioned how we worked with Dr. Bain with her Tier 1 framework. We worked with her with that all the way through our high school content areas. So we have been working with those teachers. It is hard. I mean, I'm not saying that we have successfully conquered that yet. We're still navigating through it and defining it as we go. But our expectation is for the routine to be followed with fidelity, regardless of grade and content. And we're reinforcing that with our principals so that they've got a knowledge of it, because as a secondary person, for whoever may be secondary with us right now, we're not taught how to teach kids how to read. So it is a very new concept for secondary minded folks. And so we really started with embedding the research not embedding, giving them the research to show them how the brain works, to show them how the brain would learn how to read, and the tools that they would need to help fill in some of those gaps. So we are still working through that. So I'm curious to see the session too that I think Beth was going to share that would help further define that for us. But we're navigating through that, and I am happy to discuss it a little bit more in depth with anybody that may be interested. You're welcome to reach out to me.
Okay, friends, at the Reading League, we say it takes a league, and I have hopefully just introduced you to some powerful folks in your league. So Stephanie, Stacy, Melissa, Angie, thank you. Would you put your emails in the chat if you're open to having folks reach out to you? And we'll leave that as your point of contact, friends. Continue learning, connect with your Reading League chapters, start with small successes, right? And build on that. This work is possible. And you all are doing amazing, amazing things to transform literacy in our country, and we are grateful. So thanks so much again for inviting us today.